Well, good day and welcome to our next lesson in the study of the book of Baruch. We're still in chapter 13 and another short section from verses 24 up to verses 27. And if you recall from previous studies, Jesus is still on the Mount of Olives after having spent the whole day at the temple teaching people, talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes, essentially putting in a full day before he left the temple, came across to the Mount of Olives, and then he was sitting with his disciples when they asked him what were the signs of the end of the times. What were the signs, and when would he be establishing his kingdom? And they were still under the impression that this was going to happen very soon, that Jesus was going to do something to overthrow the Romans, that he would be establishing the kingdom that he talked about in Jerusalem, and that they would be assisting him, and this would all be taking place within a short time. So Jesus has given them some idea of what was going to intervene between the time he was talking to them and the time the kingdom would be established. He talked to them about the signs of the times, the signs of what would be happening. And this discourse is now known as the Olivet Discourse, where he told his disciples about the wars and the rumors of wars and the earthquakes and the famines, the signs in the sky that would develop, the pestilences and the plagues that would take place, and that this would be only the beginning of troubles. And then that this would go on further as time went on. It would build up and build up and build up until a time known as the Great Tribulation. And he said before that when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, then this Great Tribulation would be taking place. And this would be a sign and a time of great distress, destruction, and decay upon the earth. He said this must take place first. Why is God putting the world through such a terrible ordeal? And it seems to be primarily because the earth, the world, the people in the world have disobeyed God for so long, have gone their own way against God's direction, against God's instruction, that it has now come down to this. And he said, as he said in our past lesson, if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, there he is, do not believe him. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. And this is why he is telling us this beforehand, so that we will understand. He talked earlier in this chapter, about being deceived by great prophets and being deceived by false Christs. And now he's saying that even the elect will be deceived during this time of tribulation. Now this could be considered to be only an allegorical type of description, a poetic description of how disasters would happen in the last days. And in this section we're coming now, he said the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars of heaven will fall, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Is this what is truly going to happen, or is this just a poetic description of how bad things are going to get, of how the destruction that will ensue? It would be easier to consider this to be only allegorical or poetic if this were the only place in the Bible where it's mentioned. But this is mentioned through many other books of the Bible. In Daniel chapter 9, in Daniel chapter 12. In Revelations, in many parts of Revelation actually, Joel chapter 2, Isaiah chapter 34, and chapter 12, 13, and 24, Ezekiel chapter 39, all of these chapters give evidence of the same type of horrendous destruction and devastation that will take place, and it corresponds quite closely to what is spoken of here in Mark. None of this is new. And if the disciples knew the Old Testament and had followed the Torah and the old prophets, they would have known exactly about what Christ is speaking. So, whether this is all true literally or true allegorically makes little difference. What Jesus is saying is there will be great destruction and devastation and great distress upon the earth in this time. This is the culmination of the present day earth events. And if you've been watching the news and watching how things are going right now, then you can see how this gradually is encroaching upon us, how this is gradually building up to something, because there seems to be every day more disasters, more earthquakes, more typhoons, more tornadoes, more flooding, more wars, rumors of wars, threats of wars. There seems to be no definite direction in which the earth is going except towards destruction and disaster. So this is all building up. How long it's going to take, we don't know. But the point is, we are told to be ready, because this is what he is saying in this section. But in those days, after that tribulation, after all this destruction and devastation and distress, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars of heaven will fall, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. In other words, there will be some great catastrophe, disaster. Perhaps the sun will be darkened and the moon will be darkened because of the ash from the earthquakes and the volcanoes that take place. Who knows? All we know is that there's going to be some great disaster which is going to occur, and there is going to be great signs in the heavens. And then it says, they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. It said in Acts, when Jesus was taken up into heaven and the disciples were sitting there watching this, the angel said, "Why do you do this? Why are you watching this? Why do you sit there? Because this same Jesus whom you see going up into heaven will likewise come back from heaven in like manner." And this is what this is saying: the Son of Man will come in great power and great glory, and he will send his angels and gather together his elect from the four winds, from the furthest part of the earth to the furthest part of heaven. Those who have accepted Christ, the elect, those who have followed him, those who believed in him, those who have taken a vow to follow and to accept what he says as truth. These will be the elect, and those who have continued to follow him, who have continued in his way, who have continued in his word, in spite of all the deceptions, in spite of all the deceit, in spite of all the discrepancies that have brought up the evil being, the false Christs, in spite of all the devastation and destruction, those who have continued to carry on until the end. As it says before, back in the earlier part of chapter 13, those who will be hated by all but for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end shall be saved. And those will be the elect whom he will gather from all parts of the earth, from the four corners of the earth, from the furthest parts of the earth, and from the furthest parts of heaven. This will be the culmination of the events on earth up to this time. This will be the time when Christ comes back and will show what really is going to happen and take place from then on. This is when the kingdom will begin to be established, the kingdom that the disciples have been watching for, waiting for, and wanting to see. But between the time this was spoken and the time this would take place, it was a vast amount of problem, destruction, devastation, and judgment upon the earth. And like I say, this is not spoken of just in Mark, but is spoken of in many other books of the Bible, both the Old and New Testament. We have been warned through many different aspects, many different avenues. We have been warned about what is coming. Do we believe it, is the question. Do we believe what the Bible is telling us? We have a great tendency to believe only what we want to believe, what seems to be good and seems to be beneficial to us at the present time. We don't want to believe and accept the other parts of the Bible that God states is coming. So we are told that all of this is going to envelop and develop over the course of history as God's judgment upon the earth takes place. This is not spoken of very much anymore, but this is all part of the biblical story, the biblical aspect of what is going to happen. Jesus said, after the Great Tribulation, after all this devastation has occurred, then will the Son of Man come in his glory and power to show the world what and who he really is. And he will send his angels and gather his elect with him. This is a very important part of this story, and it's important that we accept the fact that this is going to take place. We have to agree that if we believe in the Bible and have faith in God, then we have to accept that this is going to happen. We may not like it, we may not think it is right, but this is God's judgment upon what the world has become and what the world is at the present time. There are many false religions out there, false religions that people tend to go toward more so than Christianity because they don't like the truth. It is much easier to believe in something that you yourselves create than in what God himself states. So this is a little section of this part of this chapter that we're going over tonight. After the tribulation, the Son of Man will come in great power and great glory. The days when the sun and the moon will be darkened, the stars will fall from heaven or seem to fall from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. When all this happens, the Son of Man, God Jesus, is going to come back in great power and glory and take all his people from the four corners of the earth and from the furthest reaches of heaven with him. He will gather this up, and we will see what happens in our next section as we get into it further in the next week or so. The parable of the fig tree in the next part of the chapter 13 in Mark. That's all for tonight. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hope to see you again soon.